Welcome. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to see so many people here. Welcome to Twin Cities Con. Welcome to what I think is the most exciting conversation of the weekend. I have to tell you, so I'm Jeri Shepherd, and to be standing up here, sitting up here with two of my literal heroes is going to be, if I get a little bit shaky sometimes, please forgive me. I'm a sci-fi author, and I'm literally up here with Hugo Award winners, New York Times bestsellers, people who have written hundreds and hundreds of books, including across this crazy little space series. It's like kind of military. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this Star Wars thing. You guys, honestly, I'm going to read from my notes here just because I want to make sure that I'm getting some of this right. But John, Jax, Miller. Hello. You have been, this is what I was just reading about when I was looking at my favorite particular Star Wars book. It says, The Living Force is the Jedi-centric Star Wars story we needed. And I kind of love that. But then, about my other good friend up here, Timothy Zahn. A good villain is often hard to find, but Zahn does the best job here. And I could not agree with either of those more. We are up here today with the literal builders, other than perhaps George Lucas himself, of the Star Wars universe, and I'm psyched. And so, first of all, just in case there's some random person in here who doesn't know who we're up here with, I'm just going to start with a really simple question and just kind of give us your little 30-second bio and let us know a little bit about how you would introduce yourself to a random person on the street who doesn't know exactly what the Star Wars universe is all about. We'll start with you, John.
I am John Jackson Miller. I live in Wisconsin. This is my first con in Minnesota. This is probably a fall con many, many years ago. I actually injured my eye on Thursday driving here, so I have not gone Hollywood. I actually look like I'm cosplaying as a Sith, or rather as a Tim Burton Batman villain, so I wanted to restrain everybody from that. I have done a lot of things in Star Wars. My first work was 20 years ago. They have basically decided to reprint all of my stuff this year. So my very first comic book, which was a Darth Vader comic book in Star Wars Empire, they just reprinted a giant edition there. They have also just reprinted my Knights of the Old Republic series from the start, which I did for years. And they also have just reprinted the Knight Errant. I did the Knight Errant novel and the comics. I did the Lost Tribe of the Sith novel and the comics. And I did the Kenobi novel, which has never not been in print. And then I also did the New Dawn novel, which was the Rebels prequel series. That is in a 10th anniversary edition, and has it been that long? It's hard to believe. And then finally, she mentioned the Living Force, which is we'll talk about a bit later, but that's my most recent Star Wars novel. And I do hop between universes. I got the actual offer to write The Living Force the day that my Star Trek Strange New Worlds novel, The High Country, came out. And I was in the middle of working on Star Wars, The Living Force, when the novel that came out last month was offered to me, and that is Batman Resurrection, the first novel tying into the Tim Burton Batman movies. So I am... my passport has a lot of stamps on it.
Thank you. If there's a universe you love, he probably writes in it. My good friend Timothy, go ahead. Let's hear your spiel.
Well, no one trusts me with Star Trek or Batman, but I have done a couple of Terminator books. I didn't realize it was show and tell, but I have worked. I don't know, how do I introduce myself? Usually, hi, I'll take the chicken parmesan, please. I've been at this writing business for 40 years, been at Star Wars for about a third of a century, if I want to feel really old. You know, I created Grand Admiral Thrawn, Mara Jade, Talon Card. I got to be the first novelist to write past Return of the Jedi. So it's been a long and a very fun ride, and I'm hoping it will continue.
I'm super honored to be up here with you guys. Timothy's on, you guys. So we're going to go back. I'm sure a lot of people in this room know that time when a light went on in their head because of watching something in the Star Wars universe. Whether it was in The New Hope, which was my generation, and or it was even in the New Dawn era. We know when, hey, I have a story in my mind for this universe, and I want to know what that moment was for each of you.
I saw A New Hope, which was called Star Wars back then. The second night it was in theaters, working on my thesis the first night, and I wasn't able to make it. The theater was packed. Saw the crawl go by, Leia's ship goes by, stops shooting back and forth, and then the Star Destroyer comes over and keeps coming and keeps coming. And by the time, I'd never had a sense of size in a movie before. And by the time you got to see the stern, I thought, okay, I'm going to like this movie. The second really moment that grabbed me in that movie was the cantina, with Obi-Wan suddenly changing from an old wise man to a warrior. And that scene stuck with me for years. I never expected to be able to write a Star Wars story or a book, so that question never arose. I might as well have decided I was going to swim to the moon. But when the offer came back in 1989 to do the Thrawn trilogy, it was a new dream come true, one I didn't know I had. And it's, as I said, it's been a delightful and a fun roller coaster journey, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So, and thank all of you for letting me do this.
I was 9 when Star Wars came out. All the kids were talking about it. I had no idea what they meant. I thought they were talking about Dark Invader or something like that, because I was like, Darth? What is that? We couldn't get in to see the film for a long time because this was before the era of multiplexes. I grew up in Memphis, right down the street from Graceland, and the theater where I finally did get to see Star Wars was the one that Elvis Presley used to shut down at nights to actually watch movies after midnight. I think it probably was one of the last movies he ever saw. So obviously I was thrilled by the movie. But the only way to actually relive the movie after that for a long time for a lot of people was either in the merchandise. I had the toys. I had the Luke Skywalker with the wrong color lightsaber, action figure. I had we had the comics, because the comics had started coming out even before the movie came out. The adaptation of the movie had come out before the movie came out. So my interactions were really earliest with the comics that Roy Thomas and Howard Chaykin did, my first, I would say, adult novel that I ever read was Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was Alan's just in case Star Wars failed movie sequel, and so I fairly early on got the notion that this is a world that could be expanded upon. And I was, particularly a fan of the Marvel series as I was growing up. I did my own comics, my own sort of version of Star Wars. It was not Star Wars fan fiction. I didn't know what that was. I was also a little capitalist, and I knew I wanted to be able to sell my stories one day. So it's strange that pretty much almost all of my work ever since then has been in somebody else's sandbox.
So I want to know, though, you actually touched on one of my next questions, which was you talked about growing up with the comics, and you have this vast array of different types of genres, like different types of formats you write in. So you have the comics, you have the short stories, you have the full-length novels, some in series, some in standalone. So in your head as a writer, where is it that you decide, this is a direction I want to go? when you're deciding what story you're writing? How do you know whether it's each one of those different things?
Well, I mean, it starts with them coming to you and saying, we would like you to write for this or that or the other thing. Yeah, I mentioned the passport. It was the case that once I did, I got Star Wars because I had written Iron Man for Marvel, and showed that I could write that character and not mess it up. But once I had worked for Star Wars in comics, I got the opportunity to do short stories for the StarWars.com website. I then got to do the short stories for Lost Tribe of the Sith. That led to doing novels. Also in there, I did work for the Star Wars role-playing game from Wizards of the Coast at the time. And basically, as far as which medium or which format something belongs in, I mean, sometimes a story can actually work better in another, and you'll hang on to it and use it later. The Kenobi novel, which was my first New York Times bestseller, was originally a graphic novel. It was going to be a graphic novel that I was going to do for the 20th anniversary of Star Wars, would have been 2007. And as I continued to write the outline and turn in new revisions of it, it got longer and longer and longer and longer, and we realized this will never in a million years fit. And so I put it on the shelf and said, okay, if I ever get to write a novel, it'll be available. And it would be 6 years before that would happen, but it was pretty much off the shelf.
By the way, you just definitely, it still freaks me out when you're like, oh, in 2007 on the 20th, I'm like, oh my Lord.
Has it been that long?
I was like, and so we're getting up to 2027 here shortly. So what about your progression? So how did that, what was your kind of order of getting into it?
Well, most of the time, I've only done a few comics, and those were contracted for as comics / graphic novel sort of thing. Most of the time, after 40 years of doing this, I know whether an idea is short story, novelette, novella, or novel, or possibly trilogy idea. Though, as John said, sometimes they will surprise you, and this will get longer than I expected. But most of the time, if somebody says, would you do a Star Wars short story, I can come up, okay, here's an idea that will fit in the word requirement they're offering. Sometimes, actually, as far as trilogies are concerned, I've got 3 sort of trilogies, but aside from the original Thrawn trilogy and the Ascendancy trilogy, all of those books have been contracted one at a time. So things like Spectre of the Past, Vision of the Future, some of those I can pick up plot threads, but I can't start one that I know has to go on, because I don't know if I'll ever get that next book. So that's kind of a limitation. I don't know, have you ever, how does that work with you?
Well, I mean, one of the things when I did Knights of the Old Republic, because I did that series for what ended up being 57 issues over the course of 2 things, that's something where I didn't have all 5 years planned out at the very beginning, but I did plant a bunch of seeds for things that we could draw upon later, and then we had to actually deal with things that were going to arise, having nothing to do even with our publishing schedule. For example, I hit a traitor in the series for 3 years, and I never knew whether I was going to get to pull the trigger on that. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna tell the artist this is what's going to start happening. This character's posture, everything is going to change. His speaking style was going to change starting here, because the person inside this Mandalorian armor is not the same person as they were in the beginning of the series. But I wrote it so it worked both ways. And I had the option then that if we didn't get to actually finish the series, or if it were to be canceled like a TV show or something like that in the middle, that it wouldn't look weird. And fortunately, we actually did get to change that. But I mean, we had all sorts of things happening. That Dark Horse decided in the middle of Knights of the Old Republic that they wanted to do a crossover, like most comics universes have. Literally, it was the email that started it was the editor saying, we'd like to do the same thing everybody else is doing. We want to do our own crossover, and what it meant was it dumped a story in the middle of my series where I had to set aside everything I had planned, and we ended up flip-flopping what in my mind had been the next year's arc of stories. We ended up reversing them because we wanted to actually show that the events of our crossover vector had major implications. And so we're changing things on the fly. But you can do that if it's something like a monthly comic book. You can sort of do that in a trilogy of novels if something has come along that you have to deal with. But that's kind of how it works.
So you talk about,
John talking about we want to do what everybody else did.
Yeah.
My agent had a nice phrase where they said, everybody wants to be first to be second. Nobody wants to take a gamble on Harry Potter, but boy do they want to have the first Harry Potter clone out there.
That's a great quote. I like that one. You talked about planting seeds. What about the ones that you didn't even think you were planting? So I want to know from each of you, what is that surprise, either character or story, that they came back to you, whether it was Lucasfilm came back to you or somebody came back to you and like, oh, no, we want you to go with this. And you ended up writing a story that you're like, I didn't even know that that one was coming, but it was based on something that was in one of your stories.
The last page of Scoundrels was suggested by the editors, which we won't say anything more about that. But if you read that book twice, it's a bit different the second time, because you see some things that you wouldn't have noticed before. It was before I wrote the novel, so I could put all this stuff in, but again, it's the make it look very reasonable, make it look like nothing else is happening, and then hit them with the hard right angle turn. Aside from that, probably the closest thing would be that Outbound Flight was postponed until after the Attack of the Clones. It was supposed to be before that because that's where it fit chronologically in the series, and for some reason they postponed it till after. Still not sure why, but the upshot of that was because we had Attack of the Clones. I had all these new spaceships that the Techno Union and the Separatists were using. That was it DK who did all the little cross sections. I could look at all the cross sections. Here's a weakness. Thrawn can exploit that. So I got to use their stuff where I would have had to invent my own before. So that's a case where, okay, we're going to change everything, but very much for the better.
One of the running themes of all of my previous work in Star Wars had been basically the Jedi alone. Obviously, Luke Skywalker was the prototypical Jedi alone cut off from the Order, but Knights of the Old Republic, Knight Errant, even Lost Tribe of the Sith has a sole Jedi in it on a planet full of Sith. Obi-Wan Kenobi in Kenobi, he's the only Jedi left in his mind. The Kanan novel, New Dawn. All of these are about Jedi trying to actually decide what they're going to do, how they're going to do their thing for the galaxy without the Jedi Order there to support them, tell them what to do, tell them not what to do. And a lot of my books had been critical about the Jedi Order as an organization. Whenever the Jedi get together in clubs, usually somebody starts a war. Something no good happens, and this whole thing about no connections, I have just a lot of critiques of that in my previous work. So when they asked me to do a Jedi Council novel this spring, or actually last spring now, I was kind of surprised because it's like, we want you to do a novel about the Jedi Council in action, and my response was, Jedi Council in action is pretty much their whole thing. They don't do anything. And I said, so I'm a weird person to do this, but as they say in Star Trek, only Nixon could go to China. And I said, all right, here's what I want to do. I want to do a novel where the whole springboard is Qui-Gon Jinn walks into the Jedi Council chamber 1 year before Phantom Menace, and he says, when was the last time you people actually helped anyone? You sit in this room, you come up with rules, you come up with prophecies, you never let anybody but Mace Windu and Yoda talk. You send poor Uriel Poof out to get pizza. And you have no idea what's going on outside this literal tower of yours. And you know, there could be a senator about to take over the Republic, and you wouldn't even know it. He's nicer than that, but he says get out and touch grass. And Mace Windu, to his credit, says challenge accepted, road trip. And that becomes the living force. And so we ended up actually putting a map in every copy of the book, and the special edition is the color edition of the map of the planet that they go to. But yeah, I mean, it was, and again, I was surprised to get the offer to do it, but I was also surprised by my reaction when I was writing it, because there are 12 different Jedi in the Order, or rather on the Council, and they don't all agree. And they have different variations of thinking about these things. We have characters like Depa Billaba, who, you know, she idolizes Cara Holt from Knights of the Old Republic, or rather from Knight Errant, you know, as a legendary figure. And so yeah, you know, they all have their different reasons, and some of them are more supportable than others for the way that they run the Order.
So writing in the Thrawn trilogy, writing in The Living Force, how do you decide, or do you get to decide, which character's path you're going to follow? Or are you basically told, hey, this is our guy, you know, you've got to, because you're writing in somebody else's IP, and so you don't have control over all of it. So when you do have control, how do you decide which story you're going to follow? And then if you don't have control, you know, how do you like grasp onto that other story and tell that person's story instead?
Generally, I tell all the stories. I mean, I've got multiple characters, and most of the time they have stories worth following until they all intersect at the end in the great massive battle with 5 or 6 points of view that George bequeathed to us, which are fun to do. So nobody's ever, I don't think they've told me. There was one time where Lucasfilm had this idea of a character being in the novels, the comics, and maybe the games. And they gave me this character, okay, this is who it is, can you put this in the book? One time they said, we want this character in. Okay, he's a minor role, but pivotal in some ways. So, but other than that, they basically said, tell us what you want to do, we'll tell you which sections you can't, and then we'll vet the final manuscript, and just turn me loose on it. Have they been telling you?
Every so often they'll give you a character that they want you to insert because it's somebody that they're going to use someplace else or something like that, and that's the whole idea of Lucasfilm Story Group. It's to actually make these things look planned. And they are. We were able to actually you know, have sneak previews of some of these things, and it's all coordinated. You know, on The Living Force, yeah, I was told at the beginning, yeah, there's 12 members of the Jedi Council, but you don't have to give everybody something to do. And I said, no, that's all problem. We don't know the voices of Saesee Tiin. We don't know the voices of Uriel. We don't know the voices of some of these characters. Adi Gallius, we've only seen a couple of times. And I said, I've been doing Star Trek with huge casts, and so I got out my spreadsheet, and I figured out how to do a story where all 12 members got important things to do, and they were stories that looped around on each other, and you know, we have a very fun sort of a buddy cop movie thing going on between Ki-Adi-Mundi and Uriel Poof, and again, it all is streamlined and makes sense. It is not what I would call beginner level kind of stuff to try to put that many characters in, because you know, we're talking about 16 point of view characters in this novel, because you know, you've got those 12 plus I had to have Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and then we get our villains.
So when you have some of these different IPs that you're working in, so you've got your Star Trek and your Star Wars, and a lot of times people are in one camp or the other. I say you can be in both camps, but have you ever created a character that was the essence of that character was meant for your Star Wars books or for your Star Trek books, and then you're like, you know what, it didn't work, but I can take the essence of that character and work them into the other universe. So I'm curious about that for either of you.
Generally speaking, I start with, when I'm starting to plot out a book, the main characters start out as cardboard cutouts. Okay, this is the villain, we'll call him Thrawn. This is a heroine, a new character, we'll call her Mara Jade. And as I develop the storyline, the characters start to flesh out. And it goes both directions. I can have, okay, this is something cool. I'll need one of these characters to have this ability or this predisposition or something. Or this is a cool thing for this character that'll affect the way the story goes. So I don't ever come up with a character that doesn't fit the universe I'm writing in, because they start out automatically fitting into the universe.
You know, what I find is that a number of the books that I've done for different franchises kind of rhyme. And so I wrote the Kenobi novel, Obi-Wan Kenobi's, you know, getting over or trying to adjust after losing the Republic and everything like that. The equivalent novel in my Star Trek canon is a book called Die Standing, which is about Michelle Yeoh's character from what's going to be the new Section 31 show. The Mirror Universe Emperor who controlled everything and then lost everything. And so this is likewise a character who's having to deal with having lost more than anybody has ever lost and trying to decide, like Obi-Wan, how to go forward. I found that I had rhyming things going on between the New Dawn novel with Kanan, who doesn't know what happened in Order 66. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't have a purpose. He's just drinking his way through what remains of his life. Well, that same book, more or less, we get in a book I did called Rogue Elements in Star Trek for Picard, which is the Rios character, who gets thrown out of Starfleet, doesn't know why, and has to basically bum around as a Han Solo-like character in Star Trek, except he drinks more, smokes more, and has a more active social life. But it rings a lot of the same bells in these things. And every so often, you are able to bring ideas over. That title, Rogue Elements, was one of the possible titles for New Dawn. Well, the original title was going to be Loose Cannons. And then they said, okay, yeah, we're actually making this the first novel in the new era of canon. I said, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. but yeah, so I used that there. And then very infrequently, I will take I'll have an in-joke in one universe and use it in another. There is an artifact that shows up in Lost Tribe of the Sith that then also appears in Knights of the Old Republic in the comics, that then appears in Rogue Elements in a junk pile on a ship somewhere. And again, for those in the know, they know.
So cool. I love those little secrets. That's great.
There is in the Bane books universes, there's a character named Buckley who shows up periodically in everybody's books to get killed. So he's been killed something like probably 50 times at this point. So it's become kind of an in-joke. Wait for Buckley to show up. Oh, okay, we know he's going to die. Let's see how he does.
Oh my God, you killed Buckley.
Basically, yes.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm going to be leaving some time for some questions, so I'm going to get to a couple more here. But I'm going to do the thing that we're never supposed to do as writers, and I'm going to say, tell me about your favorite baby. So I'm going to start with you, Timothy. Who is your favorite baby?
Generally, whatever I'm working on at the moment is the most exciting thing, because if you're just going through the motions, it's going to show. That's as far as I will go with that. I got 70 of them, and I don't want them fighting among themselves. What I'm most excited about is whatever I'm working on right now. So that would, at this point, the Icarus saga, I'm finishing that.
I'll tell you, I never even knew this was something I could ask for. People for years had said, what's the franchise you haven't done yet? And the Tim Burton Batman movies, I saw the original 12 times in the theater. I wrote reviews of it for my college paper. My reviews from back then, I had questions about it, about the movie, and I've got to actually address all of the questions about the movie in Batman Resurrection with the permission of Warner Brothers and Random House and DC Comics. and we've had the support of Michael Uslan, this producer that brought everybody the Batman movies. Got a really nice note from Sam Hamm, the screenwriter of the film. Met Danny Elfman 3 weeks ago in New York. Again, I love Star Wars, I love Star Trek. I don't write in any franchise anymore if I can help it if I'm not a fan, because that's just work and fans can tell that you don't really love it. But this has been wonderful, and the day that we released the book 2 weeks ago, we announced that the sequel is coming out by me next fall, Batman Revolution. So we have Resurrection and Revolution.
This is not happening inside the Matrix, is it?
No, it isn't. Absolutely.
So tell me about some of the other books. You had mentioned that you're working on your Icarus. Is it a trilogy or is it?
It's 6 books.
6 books. Okay. So
first 4 are out. The 5th comes out next month, and the last one comes out in April. So finishing up the last book, doing the final edit after our son, who blind edited it, is finished. So after that, I'll be going on to the 5th Manticore Ascendant novel I'm working on with David Weber. After that, hopefully some more Star Wars. We're having trouble getting Lucasfilm to stand still long enough for us to pitch ideas at them. We have 97,000 projects going at the moment. So I've got hopes of doing more Star Wars. Then I go into my file of, I could do this book, and start doing those.
And some of your babies. So like, what are you working on now? What
Well,
are some of your
as I mentioned,
outside-
Revolution is the one now, and I have another. There's another thing I can't mention yet, but again, he's right. Something like Star Wars is a big moving freight train, and it's moving in a lot of directions on a lot of tracks at once, and you never know when it will happen. You've mentioned you've been in and out of Star Wars many times. I've had that period now too, where when 2014, when New Dawn was coming up, that's when they brought us both to San Francisco for Lucasfilm to do the recording for announcing what the Legends thing would be and everything after that. I managed to get Tim lost on the Presidio of San Francisco. All the buildings look alike. Only one of them has Yoda in front. But again, I mean, at that time I had a novel and you hadn't for a while, and then you had your trilogies and coming back, and then I was 10 years between novels, but we're never gone because they have us doing. Even though I hadn't done a novel between New Dawn and Living Force, I had done short stories. I did a novella for Canto Bight, the book there. They just try to find things that fit their schedule and our schedule, and that will be interesting for us.
I've heard horror stories from Star Trek writers who've been a third of the way through a sanctioned novel, and some episode of Deep Space Nine cuts the legs right out from under it. And much as I want to do more Star Wars, I don't want that to happen to me, and I'm sure Lucasfilm doesn't either. It's a waste of everybody's time.
I will say it feels nice doing the standalone novel. That's what Living Force was, and basically, that's the way it all works with this sort of thing. The farther away something is from actually being an active project. I did the 40th anniversary graphic novel for Battlestar Galactica, and it was pretty much go nuts because it was not anything that was going to have anything colliding with anytime soon.
Yeah, same thing with the Ascendancy trilogy. It's out in the unknown regions, just fighting enemies of various sorts. It's way off camera of anything Lucasfilm is going to do, so they let me do virtually anything I wanted to in those.
So both of you are by the way, in a couple of minutes, we will be starting to open this up to your questions. So you are welcome to start to line up at this microphone if you like for your questions, but we'll get to them in just a couple of minutes. So both of you guys are together, certainly. This is like the unified, most prolific voice in the Star Wars universe up here, I feel. And so I'm curious, have either of you ever been brought an idea that you were like, Timothy's like, you know what, this feels like more of one of John's, or vice versa, or maybe not because of the idea, but because of your schedule, or like what kind of like back and forth might have existed between the two of you, if any at all?
Well, I never wanted to do anything. You know, I wasn't going to touch Thrawn at all. but also, all of my work was in the Old Republic, and I felt that was safe from colliding with all of the new stuff, and also that I didn't have to memorize as much stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I think people in this line, we kind of take care to not overwrite or overrule or overdub any previous works that are out there. To try to get, we want everything to coexist. However, that's not a requirement. I wrote Iron Man for a year 20 years ago, and basically Brian Michael Bendis erased my year in one page, and but that's okay, because if I get in again, it's coming back. But that's okay. I haven't actually been even asked for a while, right?
Leland Shee said something years before the Disney acquisition, that everything in Star Wars is somebody's favorite, and that includes the books. So we do try not to overrun each other's stuff. We try not to. If we have to change something, we go in with a scalpel, not a machete. And I think that's shown. The fans recognize that care and appreciate it.
I love that I can be a fan of both of yours, and it's just like some of the commentary that I read, like, you're like my favorite villains, and you are my favorite heroes, and I just love getting to marry those together. That's
and
great.
As for thinking, well, this is a John idea, not a Tim idea, I think John could take any idea and write a good book out of it. So I wouldn't, or
depends on what they pay.
There's that, of course. But it's not a matter of, well, this sounds more like something John would like to. I think I could take on pretty much any idea, and vice versa.
We're professionals. This is what we do.
That's our job.
I have no doubt that you could both cover both. I was just curious if it was ever something that crossed your mind. And with that, we have quite a line growing, so we're going to go ahead and start to open up to some of your questions.
All right, thank you. My name is Jeremiah. I'm from Empire Radio, Star Wars podcast. My question is for Mr. Zahn. When Thrawn is mentoring somebody in the Empire, does he actually care about that individual, or is he just crafting him into a tool he can use in the future?
Thrawn recognizes, like all the rest of us, he's not going to live forever. He wants minds and people who can take over from him down the line, or be someplace he cannot be. He wants people to be able to do not the same thing he does, but not the way he does, the way each individual will learn how to track logic, track ideas and such. So it's, yeah, he is interested in the person learning how to do this. And people who are teachable, he will spend the time to teach. But it's not just as an asset. He knows he's not going to be everywhere at all and not forever. So it's not just a tool I can use. It's I want allies, not tools.
Afternoon. Both of you have written non-human characters. I'm thinking Tusken Raiders and Chiss. How do you write a species that doesn't exist?
The Tusken Raiders, some of that groundwork when I was writing Kenobi had already been done in Outlander, which was a previous comic series. I tried to give them their own mythology, their own point of view. I did not necessarily assume that they were necessarily nice people. It's possible that several of these alien species, as we see in Star Trek, might not be able to coexist on a planet together without their needs colliding. And then we get conflict from that. But even within that, I mean, we were able to show, in the Tusken Raiders, in Kenobi, that they were traumatized by what Anakin had done a few years earlier. And I said, well, this is not all Tusken Raiders that think this, but we zeroed in on this particular group and showed that they were just on the verge of collapse. as a result of what happened. And so we begin to sort of identify with them, but there's always a remove there where, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, but we're still not going to be friends because of just the differences between the cultures and the species.
Yeah, basically, when I'm doing like the Chiss, especially in Ascendancy trilogy, I'm building the culture, and as I build the culture, there are certain types of people that will fit into the story and be products of that culture. And by the time I've got a lot of those ideas, the characters are also, again, fleshed out and ready to go into the story.
Hi, my name is John, and this question is from Mr. Miller. So you did the Knights of the Old Republic comic series, which is still one of my favorite comic series of all time. Absolutely loved it. Reread it probably once a year or so. That series, you know, it was really intricate. You had a lot of moving parts, a lot of point of view characters, and it seems like you had a lot of it planned out in advance. But was there ever a point where you looked at what you were working on and went, "This isn't going the way I wanted to. I'm just going to try and, you know, change everything," or was it all just this beautiful machine from the get-go that worked perfectly?
Again, yeah, I mentioned that you know, it's a moving target doing a comic series, and I changed the order in which I did certain things. A comic series is like a sailing ship. You kind of know what ports you want to visit along the way, but you don't know how you're going to tack from one to the next to the next. You know, I mentioned that Vector ended up reordering what I was going to do. The entire Covenant storyline, Jerail's storyline, was originally going to be before Zahn resolves his whole murder mystery thing, and we flip-flopped that. But other things like, you know, I had always intended, if this thing was going to go 150 issues, 250 issues, Zahn was always going to get drafted into the Republic Army because there's a Mandalorian war going on. You know, and that was the worst thing I could imagine happening to him, and so I always want the worst thing to happen. I'm here to torture my characters. And yeah, you know, we had various iterations of things we were looking at possibly doing later, either in comics or in prose or in something else. And yeah, I kind of already know. And we actually, I've done threads on this where you know, we kind of know, or I kind of hinted at several places in the series what Zahn's role during the Jedi Civil War would end up being, and what he ended up doing. There are clues in that, and I guess you'll have to Google that. but yeah, no, we always kind of were, as we were doing the series, I had these signposts I wanted to get to later on, or was willing to get to if they were willing to let us do it forever.
So we will probably have time for only about 3 more questions.
Hi, my name is Jacob, and I have a question for Mr. Zahn. The character Grand Admiral Thrawn survived Disney's acquisition. Many others characters didn't, and I was wondering, how does it feel to create a character with such that strong a legacy?
We writers do the best characters and best stories we can. Which ones the readers will grab onto is not our decision. We want you to grab onto all of them. So it's always something of a surprise. It's very humbling, it's very gratifying when one of your characters or more last a third of a century. So I continue to be very humble, very, very pleased at the fact that Thrawn is still out there, is still entertaining people. And every time I sit down to do a book, I want this to be something the fans really like. When they finish the book, put it down, yes, that was worth the dollars and the time I spent with it. That is the goal.
Thanks for what you do.
Hi, my name is also Jacob. The question I had, what would be this is for both of you, what would be the favorite monkey wrench you've thrown at a character or a plot line, be it in your old Thrawn books or Knights of the Old Republic or some of your newer stuff?
I generally don't think of throwing monkey wrenches into things. I have the story. Are you talking about plot twists and such, or just?
Yeah, things like that.
My books tend to have a puzzle box aspect to it where the characters have to figure something out. And those are always entertaining to do. The goal is for the reader to catch on about half a page before the characters do, and be able to follow the clues that way. No favorite jumps out at me. There have been so many. I'm sure everybody who's read one has their own particular favorites. So you know, we can tally the room later on. But yeah, nothing shows up as, oh, that is very cool for me to do.
Well, during the Knights of the Old Republic comics, that was the whole thing. Is we were hitting St. Carrick and Griff with something terrible. Yeah, they think they're escaping the Jedi, and they run into the D-Day and the Mandalorian Wars. Something would always happen. But I would say the most fun twist I've done in Star Wars or in anything in a long time, in the Living Force, I'll just say that a major plot point is made out of Yoda's glamour. And you'll realize how that's possible and why that works and why it's one of the funniest moments we've had in Star Wars in a long time.
I literally laughed out loud. I was like literally laughing out loud. My husband's like, what is going on?
And now you've got to read the book.
You do.
And now, read the book you must.
And with that great advice to read the book you must, unfortunately, we are out of time with these two amazing gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Booth 819
And 821 right next to each other. You can sneer at both of us together.
and we have copies of books, lots of books.
And they stepped away from their booths to be here, so definitely go visit these amazing guys. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.